What is up, everybody? RLTK podcast. Jordan here, kicking it with my boy Chris. Chris, what is going on, bro?
What's up, man? What's up,
Hey,
bro?
I see you. You getting ready for football season?
Hey, man. Bro, look,
Oh man.
I told somebody yesterday. I said, look, Mike, because they had on the jersey. I was like, look, Mike, I respect it, but let's not be hopeful.
Let's
Let's
not
just
be
enjoy the
hopeful.
game.
Let's not. You know what I'm saying?
Let's
Don't
just
get your
enjoy the
hopes
game,
dashed.
man.
Don't get your hopes thrown away. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
man. Let's
He
just
said.
enjoy the nature of football. Cause
He said, "Let's not
let's,
be hopeful."
I want you to live a long life, man. Don't be
I'm
hopeful.
dead.
No, just
Yeah, don't be adding suffering to your days by being a
yeah.
Cowboys fan, man. I'm telling you,
Facts.
it's crazy. It's
Facts, bro.
crazy in these
I
streets.
can't.
But
I am excited though, man. Football was always my favorite, man. So
yeah,
I am
we're
excited.
entering into that like weird spot right now where like there's not really anything to watch because
Yeah,
the final start here shortly, and then after once the NBA finals are over, it's kind of dead. I mean, you got baseball, which
yeah,
is cool, but like I'm not really a fan of watching baseball on TV. I'll
yeah.
watch golf a little bit,
Mm,
which I appreciate because I played a little bit more in recent years. So like I appreciate how
that's
difficult it
true.
is. But yeah, we're kind of like at this. We get to this gap where it's kind of just boring. Now we do
Yeah.
have the FIFA Club World Cup, which I'm looking forward to because I'll be able to watch some soccer throughout the summer
I heard it's
or
gonna
some
be in
football.
Dallas too.
Yeah. So definitely got to try and get to a game. Uh, so so yeah, I think I'm excited about that. But
Yeah, it's gonna be dope, bro.
anyways, bro, let's jump into it. Let's jump into a topic that is near and dear to both of our hearts
Yeah,
for plenty of reasons.
yeah.
Mental health. Have a little conversation on this one. And there's a lot of things I'm thinking about. We just chopped it up a little bit before we jumped on here, but one of the things I probably the immediate question I would want to ask you is like how are you kind of seeing mental health affecting young people around you? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Um, how do I see mental health affecting young people today? It's weird, bro, because what I am seeing is people reacting to the idea of mental health, not in the
Mm,
sense of
that's good, bro.
not in the sense of tackling the issue, but I see people reacting to the concept of mental health. Like people are aware, like I think society is now, at least to some degree, they are aware that, hey, I think our mind's supposed to be operating in a particular way and it's not doing that.
Hmm.
And so I think society is now observing some things about the mind that they're seeing like, hey, there's some screws loose here. Um, I'm supposed to be feeling something, thinking something. I'm supposed to be aware of something. So I think in the atmosphere there is a sense of, um, hey, we're missing something in our minds here,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at people reacting to the concept of mental health.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And so that's what I see when I look at
To
the
your
young people.
to your point, I think that's a great point, bro. And to what you're saying, it makes me think of something that I often wrestle with, like in professional practice and just having conversations with people. I feel like a lot of people, it's not even the thing that they're wrestling with in their mind; it's the wrestle against the thing that they're wrestling with.
Mm,
Do you get
yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
And so it's
yeah,
like this opposition and resistance to the anxiety or the sadness or the grief or the fear. And once again, like to give context, I'm saying that in terms of the human experience, right? Like on this side of eternity, there are all different types of emotions and different things that we experience. And there are uh, times that we experience things in ways that like you would expect to experience them. Like, you know, there are times where you're legitimately afraid of something and you got to process through that. There are times where you're legitimately anxious about something. There are times where you're legitimately sad about something because something happened that should make you sad. But I think, like you said, we've got to this place where we're looking at that. And if we have any inkling or idea that that might be the case, now all of a sudden we have like diagnosable mental health challenges. And it's like, well, no, you're just experiencing what humans experience. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And so I think like there has to be this conversation about, well, what is like actually in bounds of what is normal in the human experience, and then what is outside of that, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think those two things have got mixed up. And now anytime you're having any kind of emotions that could be perceived as, you know, difficult or challenging or out of the blue, or you're going through some kind of circumstance or situation which should produce some emotions in you that are difficult, now all of a sudden you got mental health problems, right? And so I think that kind of ties into it. And I think that like the overt focus we now have on the inner life, like we focus on the inner life in ways that we didn't focus on the inner life 100 years ago, 150 years ago. We ask questions that we didn't ask. um I like the way Carl Truman puts it in his one of his books. He says, if I was to ask like my great great grandfather if he was happy or satisfied with the work that he does, he would have no context for understanding what I'm asking him, because satisfaction in that sense wasn't really a metric by which they determined what was good, right, and true and beautiful. And I'm not even necessarily saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that's what is, right? And that has
Mm-hmm.
implications for how we operate in the world, and um how we understand and interpret things. So yeah,
Mm.
I think that's interesting, bro.
Yeah. That is, bro, because it's cause I'll ask my old man something like that, and he's like, well, he has that mindset of only the strong survives, man. And man, I'm so glad you said it is what, like, it's an is understanding. It's just what is. And so, but it does bring up the question though. Um, I don't know if this era of observing the mind and mental health, I don't know if it's a privilege or not,
Mm,
or if it's an actual um
curse.
yeah, right. I don't know if it's actually what that's it. Because look, man, like, to certain degrees, if we're going to talk about mental health, we have to talk about struggle, and we have to talk about burdenship, right? We have to talk about the burden of existence, and
Hmm.
we have to talk about the, because from my understanding, I think the ultimate burden of man is to maintain order,
Hmm.
and I think that's the burden of man, is to maintain order, and it's hard to do that. It's very difficult, especially when you tie in with all these concepts of immorality, sin, injustice, all these things, that these immaterial things that exist.
Hmm.
And I have to say, well, what actually makes the mind healthy? Burden has to be one of those things. Um, Struggle has to be one of those things.
Hmm.
It just has to be. Uh, and I guess as we go into this, and I guess therapy is one of those things, right? Because I want to ask you that, like, do you see a healthy balance between burden and therapy? Or
That's a good question. So I would actually say that the therapeutic practice is a major contributor to, in my opinion, the eroding of society, for lack of better terminology.
what do you mean by yeah?
I think the wholesale affirmation of what people feel and think has been a failed experiment, to say the least.
Mm,
And so I think, once again, I think this is where discipleship comes in. I think this is where challenging young people comes in and speaking into their lives with truth. Like, I think there are moments in time where a young person is wrestling through and going through something, and it's appropriate to say like, hey, actually, it's good and right that you wrestle with this. It's good and right that you struggle with and experience this. This is like part of what it means to
mm-hmm,
grow up. This is what it means. This is the burden, like you say, of order, the burden of being a man, the burden of being a woman per se, like in a broken world, right? That we live in a world that has sin, and the reality that we're struggling with sin as well. And so I think those are important conversations to have. And I think that's the point of the distinction between, hey, like, This is something we experience right now in humanity because of the fall and because of the fractured nature of relationships, the fractured nature of creation. Um, the challenge that we experience in work and in building things and pushing back against darkness, so on and so forth. And then like, no, this is actually really out of order in a inordinate sense. You might need to go seek professional wisdom to help you get that back in order, right? And
Mm,
so I think once again, those are two different things. And those are important distinctions that need to be made. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that um, in the therapeutic space, oftentimes there's just this affirmation of this person and the normalization of what it is that they are experiencing, right? Which I get to some capacity, but I think um, normalization isn't where it should end. And so it's like, okay, you're having these strange thoughts or strange feelings or whatever, cool, like you're not the only person to experience those. All of us have super weird impulses, all of us have weird thoughts come into our mind. That's just true. And we, for a lot of us, we just kind of we don't acknowledge them, right? As quickly as they come in, we let them just leave. For some people, they cause a lot of disturbance. And at one point in time they may have caused no disturbance, and for whatever reason now they're causing significant disturbance. And so helping that person understand they're not the only person ever who's existed who's experiencing that is a good thing. But then also helping that person move past that or move through that towards health, as we would call it, right? In the mental health context, which is like a healthy mind, so that they can navigate the world in the ways that they're intended to, I think is also a good thing. But I think what kind of happens is, and I think this kind of ties into some of the larger macro things that are happening in our culture, right? Like there's this wholesale acceptance and even celebration of some of those things, right? And I think as a consequence, that's kind of where we find ourselves, and then that contributes to the confusion further. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting space that we find ourselves in. But I think we got to have those honest conversations with young people, challenge them, walk with them, mentor them, hold them accountable in those circumstances and situations, and not just um, just affirm whatever it is that's going on internally. And it doesn't mean that there aren't times where affirmation is necessary and needed. I'm not saying that either. I'm just saying I think we have to discern what's happening in the moment and engage in the way that's most appropriate to help them grow in their relationship with Jesus. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, no, I agree. Usually when I talk to young people, one of the questions I ask is, um, why does that matter, right? Why is that so important? You know, um, I try to push the mind to think further than the circumstance. And um, so it's pretty interesting, bro, about mental health is because there's a lot of there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to the mind. One of them is one of them is the thoughts you entertain, right? Thoughts are, I think, this is, and I'm still wrestling with this, but I think it's true. I think thoughts in of itself is part of the experience of being a human.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then you have to question if thoughts are something that you experience, then what value does thoughts have upon my mind as a human? How do I know which thoughts hold intrinsic value or doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
And um, if that is true, then what is the best thought I can have?
That's good.
And so that's one. And then two is obviously, uh, for some reason, the food you eat. Food plays a part on how your mind functions. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that's part of the mental health space. be careful of what you eat, what you consume.
Yep.
Make sure you eat the way you ought to eat.
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, I like me a good 12 piece of Popeyes every once in a while.
Every
And so
once in a while, every day. I mean, I'm just asking.
okay, hold me accountable. I appreciate that.
Oh man,
That's good. And also your environment, right? Um, right. So
100%.
some of us are born in environments that put us away from the world, and some of us were just born into the world, and we experience things we shouldn't experience. And so, like those things play a part of how the mind can put this existence that you're experiencing in some in some particular way that you can be able to perceive things or
Hmm.
perceive yourself and your friends and your family. And so, but the one I really try to tackle the most is the thoughts you entertain. Um, that's a very tricky one, right? Because I have to figure out which thoughts that I what are the thoughts that I should entertain the most that can bring me the most peace in my mind. Because
Mm.
I think when it comes to mental health, I do think it's some grabs. It's a grab, a reach towards peace, mental peace. That's why a lot of people, they may drink or they may, smoke or, they may, do some things of that nature because they want to experience a something outside of themselves, right? It's a search for something. And I think that's why David said, those who meditate on the law of God is like the one planted by the tree. And I think that's an interesting relationship there, as
Hmm.
though, right, the water is the nourishment of the tree, just as God is the nourishment of our minds. So that speaks to the highest thought, right?
Mm.
If there is a thought
That's good.
if there is a thought that is the most value, then it has to be God. It has to
Hmm.
be Him, right?
Hmm.
Um, I mean, this kind of speaks to the um, ontological argument to a little bit, but it's the what is the highest thought I can have, that I can think of, that I can ponder, that I can always go to. And it's crazy, bro, because it's intrinsically true, but it's also consistent, right? This thought, it's consistent, it's true, and it's intrinsic, and it brings somewhat of a awareness to your own soul. Like, bro, you remember, bro, like it's crazy when you experience God, bro. It's like, and you hear from everybody else. It's like the body just knows.
Hmm.
Yeah, that is true. There's
Hmm.
no argument. There's no debate. No, that is true. And so I think there is some relatability to,
100%.
you know what I mean? And so
But I think also
that's
too,
why.
to what you're getting at, like a couple of things that I'm thinking. Number one, like we always tell people, like you were talking about food affecting food affecting your mind. Like absolutely, what you eat, how much you sleep, how much water you're drinking, whether you're exercising. Those are things that we tell people foundationally. Like I'll tell people all the time, like, hey, are you doing these four things? And
Mm,
like 9 times out of 10, when people do those four things, they see significant improvement in their mental, emotional stability. Because
mm,
oftentimes, like when we're in a negative space and maybe we're experiencing mental health challenges or issues or whatever, however you want to phrase that, put it, or we're having some difficulty because something's happened, a lot of our rhythms and practices get out of whack. And then that begins to contribute to the degradation or the downfall of the mind, whatever you want to call it, right?
yeah.
And so, and I think this gets to the point that I was talking to you about earlier, that I think I've just been kind of chewing on, is this idea of formation. Like what, and really the question of what makes therapy like so intriguing to people. Why do people want to participate in it? And like, we've seen this kind of movement on social media where people are like almost replacing church or Christianity or religion or whatever with therapy, right? Which is interesting. But I think part of the reason for that is the formational aspect of therapy. And I think in the local church context, depending on, and I would say probably particularly in non-denominational churches, right? Like our churches that aren't necessarily tied to a tradition,
Mm-hmm.
there's like a lack of acknowledgement concerning formation, generally speaking.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is this idea that we are being shaped continually by the world around us, and that the things that we engage with do something to us as we engage with them. And so it's like they're not just things that we engage with and then nothing happens. But like every time I engage with something inappropriate, that inappropriate thing is actually shaping my perception of reality. It's shaping my thought life. It's shaping my emotions. It's shaping my desires, right? And like I said, James K.A. Smith's book, You Are What You Love, he's kind of talking through that and talking through desires and how like we're actually driven much more by those things than we are actually what we think. And in the West, we believe we're driven by what we think, but our world is shaped to draw our desires. It's kind of like, you know, you watch a couple commercials and you realize that you need all this stuff that you never knew you needed 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go to the mall, right? And now there's all these clothes that you need and all these shoes that you need. And it's like, well, how come you only just figured out that you needed that right now? And then why do you go to the other parts of the world where people have
Yeah.
no context for those things and they don't think about them? It's because our desires are being shaped by the things around us, right? And so I think there's a lack of acknowledgement concerning that. And I think therapy in a non-Christian or secular way, however you want to put it, kind of acknowledges the reality that we're being formed. And we've been formed, right? We've been formed by our stories. We're being formed by our relationships around us. We're
True.
being
Yeah.
formed by conversations we're having. We're being formed by thoughts that we have. We're being formed by what we eat and what we drink, right? And what we consume. If we're consuming, you know, substances or whatever, all of those things are shaping us. And so what therapy does is kind of helps people work through that and then think through what it looks like to begin to change those things to move towards the type of health that they would desire in their life, right? And so I think one of the things that we're not talking about enough in honestly in youth ministry especially
Interesting.
because I think about the reality of how social media and technology is shaping young people. Like it is having a profound impact on how they see the world.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I don't think we're talking about that enough. I don't think we're working through that enough. Like I appreciate Jonathan Haidt's work on the anxious generation and then all the work that he's doing like in schools and different things of that nature.
Good book, by the
Because
way.
like, yeah, it's like this stuff is really having massive impacts. And obviously, I mean Jonathan Haidt, as far as I know, isn't a Christian, but he's still acknowledged this idea that these things are forming us in ways, or should I say, deforming us, right? Disfiguring us in ways that we're not paying attention to. And so I think for us, like you said, we have to pay attention to how we're being formed. Like it's the reason why the church originally had a calendar, right? It was to push back against the world's calendar. So we have the church calendar and all the things that we're supposed to be doing at different times of the year and the things that we're supposed to be focusing on and meditating on and paying attention to because we want to be formed by those things instead of being formed by the world, right?
Yeah.
And so
Mm.
um I think
Interesting.
that is a major contributor, in my opinion, to the challenges that we're experiencing. We're not giving people enough context to understand, hey, when you watch that TV show, it's doing something to you. Hey, when you're on your phone scrolling at night, it's doing something to you. Hey, when you're doing whatever, when you're having those conversations or, you know, it's doing something to you. And so acknowledging that and then also being like, wow, maybe this means that I need to step away from that. Maybe it means I need to stop consuming that. But then on the flip side, right? Like you said, those who meditate on the law of the Lord, right, will be like a tree planted by water that bears fruit in its season, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, if that's true, also, what does it look like for me to intentionally make sure I'm being formed by the things of God as opposed to the things that the world wants me to be formed by, right?
Mm. Yeah.
And so, what does it look like for me to make sure that I'm in the Word regularly? What does it make sure? What does it look like to make sure I'm in community regularly? What does
Yeah.
it make to make sure I'm in church regularly? I'm in prayer regularly. I'm Sabbathing, and so all of those things become way more important if those things are actually forming me into what I am supposed to be. It's like, because once again, Christianity is not magic,
No.
right? Like you can't, like you don't just
Uh,
believe in Jesus, snap your fingers, and then all of a sudden, like you don't sin no more. Everything's perfect. Everything's Gucci. Everything's good. You know what I'm saying? That's not how it works. Like our world is forming us in a particular
yeah.
direction. And so I have to decide, and like scripture says it right, you're a slave to sin or a slave to righteousness. I'm being formed by one of those two things. And so how am I helping my young people understand that, and then asking them questions that make them think about their habits, their rhythms, their inner life, the things that they're participating in, the things that they're not participating in, the things that they're doing, the things that they're not doing, and say, hey, like if this is what you want, if you want to grow in your relationship with the Lord, then that actually means that you have to like stop doing things and do other things, right? To help you grow in that. And in the same way, like, hey, if you want your mind to be healthy, you probably need to stop doing this and start doing this. You know what I'm saying? You probably shouldn't be on your phone at 2 o'clock in the morning. You probably don't need to be listening to those videos. You probably don't need to be watching all these videos about all this horrible stuff that's happening around the world. You probably don't need to be, you see what I'm saying? You probably
Yeah.
don't need to be watching that show that's talking
Mm,
about people unaliving themselves. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And so I often, it's really interesting because when I have these conversations with people, I often find there's a ton of things that are happening in them and around them, and things that they're like consuming or doing or not doing that are contributing to where they find themselves mentally and emotionally and spiritually.
Yeah. That's true. That's good, bro. Because what you're talking about is this sense of obedience, right? Um, to some degree, formation is um, well, I would say, oh, it's learning how to obey, right? Because I would say the pursuit of obedience is the act of formation, right? And
Hmm.
because what you said, right, what scripture say, right, you either slave to righteousness or the slave to sin. It's easy for me to obey sin. Like there's no doubt in my mind, right? Well, that's interesting though, because in my obedience to sin, it 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 forms me into death, right? It decays my nature. And when I meditate on the Word of God, the law of God, when I meditate on Him, and when I do what He says, then it makes me into Christ, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing
Conformity
that
to
I
his image. Yep.
right, and so again, um, it goes back to it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning. Um, our nature, our very nature, how we are designed, we're made to be formed into something. That is our
Yes.
nature.
Yes.
We There's nothing outside of that when it comes to whatever you want to be in life.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. This idea you can be whatever you want and do whatever you want.
Well, I don't
What?
even think that's true though.
Yeah, no,
You
but
can you can be what
it's
God's called you to be.
yeah, you can. But it leaks into this idea that you can. Because what does that mean? You can be whatever you want. It's saying you have the free range to form yourself how you want. When in actuality, there's only two things that you could be formed into,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's very misleading. And but that's our nature, though, bro. Our nature is to become something, right? That's why we're worshipers of something. That's why when you look at kids can't really tell you. To some degree, they can tell you how they feel, but they can't articulate their emotions. They can't tell their left from their right. All they want to do is play. But what they can do very well is imitate. They can do that
Mm-hmm.
very well subconsciously without knowing it. They just that's their world. It's it's the most innocent form of imitation that it can ever be.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself is the core nature of humans is we want to become something. That's for some reason that's our driving nature. And that plays a very big part in mental health. And so like I guess when it comes to the discussion of the mind, I guess the question is, what do you want to be formed into? And
Hmm.
we have to have the discussion of the good, which is Christ, and what that brings to you. Because I think, wouldn't you say, I'm gonna ask you this question, wouldn't you say being formed into the image of Christ, wouldn't you say that's going back to the beginning and not necessarily moving forward? You understand what I'm asking?
I think so.
Like,
You know,
like we're going back to the promise,
yeah, I
right?
mean, we're returning to the garden in a sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting is like the storyline of scripture, right? Like it starts in the garden and it ends in a city. And so I think like the original intent was for God, for us to be with, walk with God and develop the world around us as we were walking with him. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's returning to that relationship, that fellowship, that deep connection with him, right? That's happening. I think that's like the thing that we're returning back to. Um
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And so, like, so you focus more on, so how would you if you was a youth pastor, how would
Which
you
I am, a
tackle,
volunteer youth pastor.
oh, okay, how would you tackle how would you tackle the mental health issues? So would you start with behavior first, or how would you try
I'd
to
start
aim
with the
towards
frame
the idea of
start with
mental
the
health?
framework. Yeah, so start with the framework to understand what it is, right? So number one, there are normal human emotions and experiences that are part of our world because of the fall, suffering, brokenness, and we're going to experience these things. And these things don't necessarily mean that there's some kind of mental health issue, right? So I set that framework first. And the larger framework is, hey, their mental health issues do actually exist, right? And here's when they usually show themselves, right? And the inordinate, well, I say inordinate, like the ability not to focus, the ability to go to work and to go to school and connect with friends, all those things that are like that make us human, right? They start to disappear. That's when we've got some kind of problem going on, right? That needs to be investigated and solved for. Um, and so once again, and I'm not, and I and I think I would say this. I'm not saying that the mental piece isn't real because it is. But I think once again, like you kind of alluded to earlier, as we were talking about how food affects you and what you do in your body affects you, what the mind and the body are very much intertwined. And we've kind of like separated those things in the West in ways that we don't need to. And so I think helping young people understand, like, yo, what I actually do in my body affects what goes on in my mind and affects what goes on in my emotions, and vice versa. They're all systems that are interconnected with each other and have implications for each other. And so I can behaviorally start to do things differently, understanding that that is going to have implications for my mind, how I feel about myself and what I think. Right. So the easiest way to explain it is like, yo, if I go to the gym, starting out going to the gym sucks. Right. Those first 2 or 3 weeks is terrible. You're sore. You hate yourself.
You
You know what I'm saying? You're like, why,
hate
why did I
yourself.
ever sign up for this? This was stupid. This is
Yeah,
dumb. But
yeah.
then once you settle into it, you're like, you're feeling better. You got more energy. You're sleeping better. You want to eat better. You're building relationships with people at the gym who are like wanting to achieve things and, you know what I'm saying? Whatever. So a lot of things start to change for you. Right. You like, when you're physically healthier, you feel more confident in yourself when you walk into certain rooms and different things. So it's like a snowball effect, right? So like me going to the gym and working out consistently affects the way I feel about myself, affects affects the way I think about myself, affects the way I carry myself physically in my body. Obviously, I'm going to carry myself differently because I'm physically fitter and more capable. And so once again, I think getting into the behavioral piece and thinking and asking students like, hey, what are the behaviors that you're participating in? How can we change those? Because ultimately that's something we can work on, right? Like I can't change your emotions. We can talk through them, process through them. And often that's very helpful, right? Talking through your thoughts, talking through your emotions, working through those. But also what we actually can change is the things that you're doing and how those are contributing to how you feel about yourself and what you actually think about yourself. And so, and ultimately, like if I'm a youth pastor, what I'm going to point kids to is the scriptures. Like, how can we? So you're thinking these things about yourself. What does God say about you? You're feeling
Mm,
these things about yourself. What does God feel about you? And then, hey, how can we build behaviors into your life that are going to grow you in your understanding of this and understanding of what it means to be an image bearer and live in the ways that God has called you to, which is participating in spiritual disciplines, participating in the local church, and maybe like not consuming some of the things that are shaping your mind in a particular direction. And the really interesting thing about this generation is they know it. If you sit down and talk with them about it, they're aware that the things that they're consuming or the ways that they're using the things that they have or not using are affecting their behavior, their relationships. And so I think helping them recognize that and then saying, hey, well, how can I partner with you? How can I come alongside you? How can I hold you accountable and help you maybe overcome some of that stuff and then grow in that? And then I think there are circumstances and situations too where it's like, okay, this person really does have some legitimate um, mental health stuff going on where it's like this is outside of my scope as a youth pastor. I need to push this to a professional so that they can get that kind of help, but then also walk alongside them as a pastor and help them grow in the spiritual disciplines that they need to grow in. Because I think there's overlap between therapy and Christianity in the sense of formation, right? So and so hopefully you can get them in with a therapist that has a worldview that is a Christian worldview, or at least not opposed to the Christian worldview, right? So that they can grow in that health, that wisdom through the soft sciences, so to speak, or the psychological sciences, but then also um, grow in their relationship with God as you're pastoring and shepherding them. So that's what I would say on that, bro. I think that makes sense. But
got you. I got you.
anyways, let's wrap it up there, bro.
Yeah.
Another conversation in the books. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, dog. It's I mean, mental health. There's so much you can talk about, so much you can say.
So we, we
Um,
we should definitely do a part two.
yeah,
Um,
I think we might need to. I think we probably
uh,
should. We should do that. There's
yeah.
there's things that I'm thinking about too, in particular that we haven't got to. But like we always say, this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end.
Yes,
Question,
sir.
comments, concerns, hit us up. You know where to find us. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.